Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Exits and Valuations in a Pandemic topic. We're really excited to be here. Apologies for any technical delays, but we have a jam-packed now 24 minutes. So my name is Shivalika Handa. I am a managing director at PwC in the mid-market investment banking group. All I do all day long is sell side or buy side M&A with technology companies in Canada. And so I'm very pleased to welcome my two panelists. I'm not even going to try either of your last names, Lucas and Atulan. If you can both introduce yourselves, that would be great. Maybe we'll start with Atulan.
Happy to. Shivalika and others. My name is Atulan Navaratnam. I'm the Vice President of Mergers and Acquisitions here at OpenText, a software company. I've been with the company for the last 5 years, and in that time, been part of a team that has doubled OpenText in size, primarily through M&A. Lucas?
Excellent. Thank you, Atulan. I'm Lucas Skoczkowski, partner at the Redlane Group. I spent the previous 20 years building a company called RedKnee. Last 3 years spending mainly on the buy side, looking at companies between $2 to $10 million in revenue. Shivalika?
Amazing, amazing. We're really lucky to have both of you. So why don't we dive right in? The purpose of this session was really to understand, obviously M&A, valuations, exits is a huge topic of conversation with tech company founders of all sizes. And so, by design, we wanted to bring together someone at the high end with Atulan and his billion-dollar acquisitions, and then Lucas at the mid to low end with, working with a lot of startups and opportunities in that regard. Obviously, there's a pandemic. We know this, and so, parking general commentary on M&A, what I would love to just open up the discussion to what has changed for your individual viewpoints on how you're approaching M&A, given we've been in this now for 5 or 6 months. How are you looking at companies, differently, if at all, and how, if anything, has your approach changed when it comes to how you're looking at M&A? So, Lucas, why don't we start with you?
Sure, thank you. I think for us, not much changed, except for we have a lot more meetings over video, of course. We're not allowed to travel, but from a valuation and kind of filter perspective, we aspire to be disciplined, although I do get excited about opportunities, which I think have a long-term kind of horizon. But I think from our perspective, really looking at businesses that meet the fundamentals. Our evaluation approach has been very disciplined, cash flow, EBITDA, where appropriate. We do look at companies that obviously burn cash, but at the same time, look at how it can make money over next 3-5 years in order to make sure the company actually is viable. So I think pandemic itself, what we have observed were transactions dried up in April, May timeframe and start coming back in June, and at least consideration for transactions. And we do expect that some distressed assets will start emerging more so in the software area, probably end of the year, beginning of next year. But so far, because of global governments' contributions, I think that has been at least pushed out, if not averted at all. So,
and quickly before we pass to Atulan, what's your view on distressed assets? I mean, is that an opportunity to pick up some good technology that may have some operational issues? What are you looking for when you're looking at distressed assets?
So we look at effectively proven technology that has application with customers. So technology by itself without customers is probably a difficult play, or I call it university project. So I think looking at some credible customers who need help in getting things picked up. And we at the Redlane Group obviously are not afraid to get our hands deep. We're all former operators. So we have not necessarily seen anything that made sense yet, but continue to keep an eye on to see if it's something that makes sense. So,
great. Atulan, your views on
Happy
M&A?
to. One thing I would like to correct off the bat, Shivalika, we look at small transactions as well. We've grown our company with $30-50 million transactions as well. But you're absolutely right. The longer we do this, it takes larger and larger transactions to move the needle. On the market itself, our observations are very much similar to what Lucas just described, so I won't go over that. But the OpenText reality is this. We've been a disciplined, patient acquirer prior to COVID. We've come into COVID, luckily, and I think this is by design, with a very strong balance sheet, a very capable team, and a similar appetite to do deals. Nothing has changed in terms of all of that. Engagement with the horizon of targets out there is the same. Appetite is the same, as I said. But there is one thing that we may be looking more closely at, and that's seller forecasts. In the last little while, we are finding that seller forecasts are still on the optimistic side. They don't seem to be, as we like to call it, COVID adjusted. Now, there are companies that have become resilient or resilient in COVID. There are those industries, absolutely. But generally, we are expecting to see companies go through some softness, and we are not seeing that in all of the forecasts we are seeing. So we may take a closer look at revenue, but otherwise our approach to deals is going to be the same. Our techniques are going to be the same. Our degree of scrutiny is going to be the same. And so, not much has changed in that regard.
So when you talk about seller forecast, that's an interesting point. I think there is a little bit of, it's probably a mix of fear that the impact on COVID is going to impact valuation. And so people don't want to talk about the negative. And then it's also hard to predict. So let's say, what's your advice to sellers that are thinking about the COVID impact? And also, how does that, when you look at a forecast where there is an obvious dip because of COVID, how are you thinking about that? Are you sort of saying, okay, well, the whole world is going through that, so we're going to look at a normalized level, or we're going to look at 2019, or we're going to look at 2021? How are you managing that dip?
I take that question first. Here's my recommendation to sellers. Present the forecast as you are seeing it. Consider us as part of your inside management team, because here's the reality. We run businesses, we are operators, we are seeing the same trends that you are seeing. And so, to sugarcoat it is not going to be very helpful, because you cast doubt on one aspect of your P&L, you're going to bring into question every other aspect as well. Tell it to us plainly. If there's softness, if there's pullback on your key customers, give us that insight. We will credit you for that. We will respect you for your candor. Because again, as I said, we look at hundreds of businesses every month and every quarter. We are operators ourselves, so we are going through the same stuff.
Lucas, any comments on that?
I definitely agree with Atulan. And I think framing it and providing some context for the customers, what the target customers are going through, even if your business is sticky, but your customers cannot pay for it, highlight it. How you dealt with it, what are discussions that you're having. I think we've seen in every package, there's usually now a COVID section in these particulars. There's, here's what's happening. Usually it's very positive, we're more sticky and so on, but there's provide, I think, a balanced view to Atulan's point, where you say it's sticky. I think we become maybe more decision-making is maybe easier in our domain, but it takes longer to get paid. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's harder to get employees to shift during the pandemic. And so just provide some context. Unbalanced positioning usually then requires more scrutiny across everything, which prolongs the process. So.
Yeah, I definitely guide my clients to show what we're doing is showing what would have been the forecast and then what the actual forecast is now revised for COVID. And, it's interesting because some industries are permanently going to change because of COVID, and some are just going to feel a transient dip and then recovery, and maybe there's some pent-up demand. And so, how do you guys think about, and are you seeing a lot of companies that have COVID market fit, meaning, abnormally good performance because of the tailwinds that are happening during COVID. How are you, when you see those companies, first of all, are you seeing them? Secondly, when you see them, how do you think about them in terms of valuation for the long term? Lucas, why don't we start with you?
So yeah, we definitely have seen what I would call, but I still call it a transient, because you have transients every 6 months, and usually companies are very quick to adopt the labeling, the language, and unfortunately, I'll call it the spin. I think some companies benefit, but if it's transient, so that's fine. I think that goes for both the positive and negative aspect of it. We are afraid, we look 5-10 years. So for us, the transient is inconsequential. And actually, I get scared where a company tries to become the latest trend adopter. I think you have to be agile and really respond to the current environment. But I think jumping from the hottest thing might indicate that business is distracted. So, Atulan?
Very similar view that I share with you, Lucas, in how we see the industry. We are a long-term investor. We don't sell our companies that we acquire. We keep them for the long term. And so I think it would be a mistake for players like you and us to think in terms of these 3, 4, 5, 6 months and act before there is certainty. We are all still in the middle of the pandemic. We don't have a therapeutic. We don't have a vaccine. And when those come on board, I'm optimistic about the human resilience here and our ability to come through this. I strongly believe we will find a way through this. A lot of things are going to come back to what we were used to. Travel will come back. You're not going to put humanity into a box for eternity. Human evolution has been by people moving from one place to another. That's not going to change. So I won't be quick to condemn certain industries or say that the resilient ones will remain resilient. They may be opportunistic today, but they better build their businesses for the long term. And this comment goes to all the e-commerce businesses that have all risen with the waters. They better have a long-term ability to keep that customer that is now coming on electronically versus through bricks and mortar, and have that long-term play, because we will be going back to stores. Believe me, it's only a matter of time. And they need to then hold on to their e-commerce customer, whether that may be a Gen Xer or a millennial or whoever that may be. So we are looking in the long term. There are plenty of opportunities. We look at the world through horizontal software applications and verticals. We may avoid certain verticals if we have to. There's too much uncertainty, but there is plenty of applications that go across the horizontal plane that are industry agnostic, and there's a lot of acquisitions for us to do in that realm.
Great. So for the audience, I want to let you guys know we're going to ask one more question on the panel, and then we're going to hopefully have a few minutes to get questions from you. So please go ahead and type them into the app if you have questions, and I'll take a look. And so while that's happening, my final formal question is really around due diligence. So, obviously face-to-face due diligence, even if you're a software company and you're a virtual solution company, is still really important. And so I'm wondering how the two of you are handling the due diligence piece of it. And in your answer, if you could also give your view on why face-to-face due diligence is still an important thing, even for technology companies. Whoever wants to go first. Yeah. Lucas?
Sure, I'll go first. So here's what we are doing. We have continued, because we look at multiple opportunities at any given time. A lot of our interactions, even pre-COVID, has been online, via email, via conference calls, now obviously more so on video. And so that's continuing. When it comes to actually drawing closer and closer to signing a transaction, we think we haven't actually at the moment haven't crossed that bridge yet, but when we cross that bridge, we will use in-country resources from our team to perhaps pay that visit. We will still abide by all regulations that require us not to take flights and not to put ourselves and our team at risk. But if wherever possible, those in-person meetings will happen between folks in country. And we foresee being able to manage that. Because I think, to your point, what our view is on in-person meetings, it is important. You may argue as to the depth of an engagement over dinner or locked up in a meeting room. But there are lots of things that you learn about each other and whether we can coexist in the future over those interactions. At the end of the day, human interaction and the personal connection is how we humans have learned to socialize and coexist. And that, I think, is going to continue. We're going to have to find a way around it.
Yeah, so I think to build on Atulan's response, which I agree with, is software without people, I see it as a liability because somebody needs to maintain, evolve it, and actually support it. I think the process of due diligence is not only about verifying documentation, maybe asking difficult questions and making feel the seller sometimes that they're on a hot seat or being tortured. I think there's actually more purpose to it. We as buyers want to look at how, what's the chemistry between the parties, both the highs and lows. So the dinner is a high, maybe a low where there's a frustration in the process where things are delayed, and see how people cope with it, especially and hopefully if and when management or portion of management stays on with the business, so we can actually work with them. So I think we have so far looked at businesses in Canada, US, and Europe. The opportunity that we are in with European, we have put right now on hold. So we expect, depending what happens, if the buyer, I think that other potential contender for it is from US, they might not be able to get there either face-to-face to Europe. So we'll see how that plays out over the next 6 months. In Canada, we will try to facilitate face-to-face meetings, obviously following the procedures for the COVID compliance. And US, obviously our government here in Canada right now does not allow us, and due diligence is not deemed essential, at least right now. But also it affects obviously quarantine there and coming back. It kind of takes us out 30 days potentially. So that becomes a bit of a complication, but we do find if it means we're gonna wait another 3 months, we want to have next 3 to 5, 10 years right ones as opposed to rushing it. And I think we've all done too many video sessions, but there's still a degree of interaction that we are missing in this two-dimensional aspect compared to what we see face-to-face.
Well said.
Yeah, and I think we also talked a little bit about, there's a lot of value in pre-existing relationships. And whenever I meet growing tech companies, even if you're not thinking about an exit for the next few years, it's always good to attend conferences like this. And, even when you're working on the commercial side, to build those relationships with potential buyers over the long term. So that, if we have another pandemic, but also, it makes the deal-making process a lot smoother when you have that relationship already in place.
Well, I think to that, Shivalika, to your point, that's a very important aspect. From a buyer perspective, it might take 2 years from the time you meet a potential company to the time you transact. I think when I was on the other side as a CEO, I would build relationship with my competitors, strategic partners, because there might be opportunity where either it's a hostile if you're public, or you might be approached. It's much easier for you to pick up a phone or do a video call with someone when you're being approached and look for options, alternatives. And that will be very helpful to your advisor if you're working with one. So I think irrespective, the building of a relationship continues, and you never know when you might use it, but it's also fun.
Yeah. So we have a question from the audience, and it is really around how you envision deal flow through the end of the year. We're looking at potentially another second wave, particularly in Canada and in Ontario, and around the world. What's your prediction on deal flow through to December? Atulan, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So Lucas talked about the slowing down and the picking up that he has been noticing in June. We have been seeing the same thing. We are talking to various people in the industry, banks of all the different tiers, and I think everybody is sensing that deal flow is picking up. We are seeing that. People have watched the space and decided how to navigate through this. My prediction is that I think the second wave is given. I think we are seeing signs of that already. I will counter that in a minute, because when I said this somewhere else, someone said to me, hold on a minute, but China has not seen a second wave. May not be. And that's a good question. I put it out there for others to comment on. But everywhere else, we are seeing a second wave, so that's given. My hunch is, though, that companies are going to find a way of keeping that deal flow going, because we have now learned how to operate. We have got a sense for how to navigate through these choppy waters. So I think that the predictions that deal flow will come back are going to be seen to be true.
Great. And Lucas?
Yeah, I think so. We continue to see interest in deals for a variety of reasons. I think people are realizing that we took a second wave. I like to move to the peak and valleys. We will see a valley, we'll see a peak, and we might call it second, third, fourth, fifth wave until it burns out, or we have therapeutics and vaccine. I think from my perspective, we as humans are resilient. Most of business entrepreneurs are very resilient. So they've already adopted in finding ways. And some people have planned to have transaction maybe for last 2 years. Some people might have to do it to recapitalize or find a new mechanism, new outlet for whatever they're trying to achieve, and obviously be distressed. So across those three categories, I expect the volume to continue to be strong. Valuations, I think, will vary, and there will be buyers for both the high valuations, and there will be the opportunities for the disciplined buyers. And I think what will be interesting is, I think unfortunately, I hate to say that, but it almost will be business as usual, the new unusual, because we now are used to the way it is.
Yep. So I think we just have about 90 seconds. Why don't we leave with some parting thoughts? Atulan, why don't you go ahead?
As I said to you, we came into this crisis strong, with an appetite to do deals. That's what we are seeing. I encourage people to do the same thing. To all the points about humans being resilient, we find a way in tough times, and we will find a way through this, no doubt. And I can see that. This conference is a great example of that desire to continue things the way we were doing it anyway, but with caution. That is the underlying theme. People are being responsible, people are being respectful of each other and the healthcare guidances, and that's beautiful to see.
Yeah, I think the same here. From my perspective, we need to remain optimistic, be kind to each other, but at the same time, continue to find a way forward. One thing I'll say for those who are interested in selling, there is actually lots of money out there looking to buy. Quite a bit of money. We're hoping for very distressed pricing. I think people in that category have been disillusioned early on. And they're hoping for some of the sectors that will be the case, likely to crystallize probably beginning of 2021, once some of the stimulus and help from governments around the world eases up. But I think this is opportunity. There is access to also refinance businesses. There's also access for different subsidies, depending where you are in Europe, US versus Canada. And I think from my perspective, continue at it. But I think for those operators out in the audience, be kind to your employees, because they're all going through the overall level of anxiety probably is a bit higher. So do not forget the mental health of yourself and your and your employees and your partners.
Well said.
That's great. Thank you so much, Atulan and Lucas. Really appreciate your time. And thanks everyone for joining. We'll let you get to your next session.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Shivalika.